Hi everybody, welcome back to the Slow Flowers Show. I'm Deborah Prinzing and we have such a special guest today. My friend Willi Galloway is in town in Seattle. Hi Willi.
Hi.
Thanks for coming over to record this.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here.
Okay, well Willi used to live in Seattle. She was the garden personality on the local NPR station on KUOW. There was a name for that show, wasn't there?
It was called Green Days.
Green Days. I kind of
Yes.
forgot about that. And
Yeah.
of course, our friend Marty Wingate was on that show too. I got to sub every now and then, but it's stressful. The Q&A format is stressful, but you handled it.
Yeah, you never know what someone's going to ask.
Well, I feel like you've always been known, you worked at Organic Gardening Magazine, you've always been known as like a organic food farming and food gardening advocate. You wrote a book, I can't believe it was 13 years ago, and now it's been reissued. Let's show everybody how it looks.
This is Grow, Cook, Eat, and it's in its new edition. So it has a new cover. I went through and updated all the variety information just to make sure that it's, it's up to date and still there and available so people can purchase the seeds I recommend. And yeah, it's
charming.
It's new and refreshed.
It is so, it's like chunky. Look at how much is in here. Oh my gosh, it's great. All right. I spent a lot of time going through the PDF. I did have the original book, but somehow through several moves, I've somehow misplaced it. So,
I know that. Yeah.
But some of you may be wondering why I have a food gardening expert on the Slow Flowers Show. Her tagline is, Grow, Cook, Eat. Tagline is A Food Lover's Guide to Vegetable Gardening. So Willi, you have this great quote in the book, and it talks about how you really can't enjoy eating if you don't grow your own food, or something to that effect. Who inspired you, and what did he say?
It's Angelo Pellegrini. He was a gardener in Seattle. He was an Italian immigrant that moved here, I think, in the 1920s. He wrote several vegetable gardening / cookbooks in the 50s. Judith Jones was his editor.
Oh my goodness.
Was Julia Child's
editor. Yes.
And he was just really passionate about like the best food comes from gardens and eating seasonally. Decades before this became a popular notion. And so he has, one of his books is a food lover's it's called A Food Lover's Guide to Vegetable Gardening, I think. So so I kind of took his title as my subtitle. And but I just really love his ethos that, if growing food, you should grow food because you love to eat it, and if you love to eat, you should grow food.
It's such a different, just a slightly different take on, vegetable growing. I love that you're writing your audience is the person who loves eating and loves good food, and that's the motivation to grow. It's not necessarily to save money. It's not necessarily to, avoid the end times or survive the end times. Yeah. It's really just because you like flavor.
Yes, yeah, and the whole book is flavor focused, and I figure that the vast majority of people who are vegetable gardening are not growing all their food.
Right. Unless you have a large plot, right?
Yeah, and so, but lots of people are interested in gardening, and so I thought, well, if you're taking the time and the effort and the expense really to put in a vegetable garden, then I want to be able to tell people, here's how you can grow the best tasting food.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you've always had a garden, and small or large, and always grown food. You told me just now that things have changed a little bit, and you're adding more flowers to your garden in Portland. So, I think I know why, but describe how that all came about.
Well, I love flowers. I always buy them at the farmer's market in the summer. And but I wanted to have more pollinators come into my garden, so I started planting flowers in with my vegetables. I have these. I have a really small garden right now. It's like 3 horse troughs and some other containers.
Because you live right in the city.
I live right in the city, and when we bought our property, it was completely paved. Like there was asphalt everywhere.
I think a lot of people can relate to that.
And so I didn't really want to garden in the soil, because even a decade later we still find asphalt when we dig in our soil. But I just really wanted those beds to look as pretty as possible, so I started planting some flowers. I do a lot of little Johnny jump ups and calendula edible flowers that look good in salads.
Yes.
And then last year I have a really pretty chain link fence. And so I decided I wanted to disguise it, so I grew a huge bank of sunflowers with a bunch of zinnias, and cosmos, just really easy old-fashioned cut flowers. And it was so fun to just have fresh flowers all summer. I loved it.
And did you notice that you had more pollinators in the garden?
For sure. And this will be no surprise to people who listen to your show, but I loved the sleepy bees. There was all these bees that were sleeping in my flowers. And I would go out and look at them every morning, and they would just be all curled up, tucked up inside the zinnias and the tithonia.
Yeah.
And I just, I do have a huge, the front of my house, I have about a 20-foot bed of lavender that runs between, we have like a retaining wall, and then the lavender's in front between the wall and the sidewalk. And so we do get a lot of bees from that,
but other pollinators too.
Yeah.
They're doing their job, but you're giving them a little place to take a nap. I love it. The book is organized by sort of food categories, and herbs are the first one. Then you have greens, legumes, squash family, cabbage family, roots, tubers, bulbs, and then warm season and fruit. So there's a lot. Well, it says 50 vegetables, herbs, and fruit on the cover. When you looked at those categories, and were you kind of trying to find the best varieties or the best practices, trying to save people mistakes? Like, are you sharing all the lessons you've learned over the years?
Yeah. So my first job out of college was at Organic Gardening Magazine. I worked there for many years, and I had like the vegetable gardening beat, which was great because my job was to call market gardeners, USDA researchers, people who work at the extension offices, and ask them how to grow separate, crops the best way. And
That's
so
crazy.
I learned so much, and then I implemented it in my own garden, and I've had pretty good success, growing veggies. And but when I first wrote this book in 2012, most vegetable gardening books were really focused on yield.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a completely different mindset than someone who's going to read this, right?
Yeah, and I think it came sort of from the 70s and the Back to the Land movement, and just like growing the most food and sort of approaching a garden as a miniature farm, as opposed to a kitchen garden. And so
the kitchen garden idea it seems like, I remember years ago someone gave me a French potager kitchen garden book, and it was so new to me to see that and that's sort of how you approach it, right?
Yes. And so I was like, okay, I want to sit down. What do people like? Tomatoes, obviously people love tomatoes.
Well, yeah, look at your cover.
Yeah.
How many varieties did you put on that cover? I love it.
And then I wanted to start with herbs because I feel like even if you just have a balcony, herbs are great. And I don't love that a lot of times you'll be cooking a recipe and it calls for a teaspoon of fresh thyme. And so you buy that clamshell at the grocery store, and then you have, so much thyme left over, and it just goes, it wilts in your fridge or whatever. And then you have this plastic box. And you can buy a little forage pot of thyme for the same price and plant it. And even if you kill it, I feel like you're better off than buying the thyme clamshell. And fresh herbs really make food taste better. I mean, you can put fresh herbs on a frozen pizza and it's going to taste better.
Willi, what you just described is so brilliant. I mean, I feel guilty every time I'm like running to the store to get fresh herbs in a plastic container. That seems counter all my values, and then that goes in the landfill because we really can't recycle the way some people think we can. And so the cost comparison I hadn't thought about, but
it's the same, or it might even be less.
And some of them are evergreen and are winter hardy, at least in the Pacific Northwest, right?
Yes. And you can grow herbs on your counter indoors. My parents live in Wyoming, and they will die, but or they're not going to thrive, but they'll be fine. You'll get they'll get
a few good meals out of it.
Yeah, and then you can compost it, and it's fine. And so I really started with herbs. Herbs also have really cute flowers that can be very nice.
There's some great photos in the book, and I'm going to share some of the photos that have herb flowers, like obviously chives, but also the edible flowers that you talked about. That you can do that because you're using organic practices, right?
Yes.
There's no chemicals on these, on these herbs or vegetables.
No.
but that's another way to kind of, I probably subtly educate people about organic practices.
Yeah.
Like, you gotta eat this, don't put anything on.
Don't put it on. You don't need to. And I think people will be surprised at how easy it is to grow organically, and that really there isn't this crazy amount of pest and disease pressure in a vegetable garden because it's not a monoculture. Like, there's so much going on, and if you're planting flowers and caring for your soil, and small gardens typically do pretty well.
That is such a good point. And also the fact that you're constantly harvesting from it, so maybe that combats mildew or some kind, other fungal diseases because there's more airflow as you're harvesting. Is that?
Yes, I would say that is good. You also just have eyes on it.
Yeah.
So if you've ever grown kale in the Northwest, you know it gets aphids. But if you're out there every day, I like to take my cup of tea and go out and water in the morning and just, say hi to my plants, look at my sleepy bees. Then you'll notice, the aphids are coming on, and you can swish them and spray them off with water and usually sort of nip that infestation in the bud. Leaf miners are one thing that are a little bit hard to deal with at least in the Pacific Northwest.
Is that a pest for like cabbage family?
It's for spinach and Swiss chard, and it's these flies that lay eggs between the membranes in the leaves, and then they hatch, and the larvae eat out these like tunnels in the leaves. And
we've all seen it.
Yeah, and that's probably my most persistent, difficult pest issue.
Do you have any organic products that you do feel comfortable using, like neem oil, or I know some of these products that deter pests?
I think insecticidal soap is good for aphids, and I think that's good on roses, and it's good on all your cabbage. That's really the only one I use. Okay. I try to do barriers more, so doing a cover that goes over a row cover is a better way.
To keep those insects out.
Yeah, and then looking for varieties that are more resistant to diseases, or it's not in the book unfortunately because I recently discovered it, but there's a Swiss chard that was developed I think at Siskiyou Seeds in Oregon, and it's called Prismatic, and it just has kind of like a thicker leaf, and it is definitely more resistant to the leaf miner than Bright Lights or some of the other Swiss chards.
Okay, we've got lots to talk about because I haven't seen you for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Distinctly remember sitting in my garden when you came up to Seattle a couple summers ago and talking about your return to writing. And I have to say, I had no vegetables at all in my garden, and I was a little embarrassed about that.
That's okay. But you inspired me to plant more flowers, so there you go.
Right. Good. That was my goal. Well, Grow, Cook, Eat just was republished. It's completely exciting to have, books get forgotten after 13 years. You need to get back, but all the information is important. It's not like it stopped being relevant. You just get it to the marketplace.
Yeah.
So now you're here in Seattle. You're talking at the Northwest Flower and Garden Festival.
Yes, I am.
What are you talking about?
Well, I'm talking about garden journaling. So for years, I had I don't even know if you could call it a system. I would plant seeds, and then I would stick them in a jar and put them in my freezer, and that's sort of how I kept track. But people would be like, "Oh, what's that lettuce you grew last year that you gave me?" And I was like, "Oh, the green one." I didn't.
Your record keeping was
my record keeping was bad. So I started. And I couldn't really always find a garden journal that worked exactly for me. So I just in Canva made some pages. But now I take the extra seeds out and put them into a manila envelope that I label and keep in my freezer.
Wow.
And I keep the package because the little seed packet often has a lot of information on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just with little glue dots stick that in, and then I write when I sowed it, when it first sprouted, my first harvest, and then I have planting, growing, and harvesting notes so that I can say what recipe I used it in, if I gave it to someone, what they thought about it.
So
just
sweet.
Sort of keeping track. Would I grow it again? Yes or no? Because sometimes you grow something and you're so I'm kind of sharing all my pages, and they're loose, so people will be able to print them off and use the ones that work. All our brains work differently, right? So
they could customize it.
Yeah, you can customize it.
I think also I should mention there's so many recipes in Grow, Cook, Eat. So your point about what recipe did you use that particular herb or particular, I don't know what other categories there are, one of the greens or the legumes or something, because we don't remember from year to year.
No.
And that's sort of how old recipe cards are. Like I have some of my mother's old cookbooks, and she's written notes in the margins.
Oh yeah,
that's kind of your version of doing that, right?
Yeah. So I just wanted to share that, and in the book, so there are 50 guides, and then in each guide, it goes through and it tells you the different stages of harvest. So when you grow your own food, you can harvest crops at different stages that you don't normally see at the grocery store or maybe even at the farmer's market.
Wow.
And then there's also all the different edible parts of the plant. So you can, with radishes, you can eat the leaves, and you can eat the flowers and the seed pods, and of course the roots. And
the radishes, I'm glad you brought that up, because your publisher gave me a PDF of the radish guide. So we're going to share that in the show notes. So you wrote a story about eating the radish seed pods or something. I've never heard of this before.
Yeah, I was just in my garden one year, and I saw one of the radish seed pods, and I was sort of kind of like, oh, I wonder what this tastes like. And it tasted good, and I kind of looked around and what else have I just been putting in the compost pile, and that led me to really think about all the parts of the plant. And actually flowers are a lot of, especially brassicas, make really beautiful and tasty flowers, but they're ephemeral and delicate, and you're really not going to have them unless you grow them.
Right.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have it a flower farmer wouldn't have them unless their brassicas bolted or something like that.
Yeah.
But in your own garden, you can make a decision I'm going to let that plant go to seed and or whatever term it is.
And a lot of times the little tiny wasps and stuff really love those brassica flowers. They have a lot of nectar and pollen, and they are a good food source. Or cilantro has beautiful little flowers, and the green. I could actually see using the green coriander seed in a flower arrangement because they're really cute.
I was going to bring up coriander and cilantro. Do you remember years ago when I was in Portland and you had? I didn't really know. I know what cilantro is, but I didn't know about using the seeds. So it's the same plant? It's the same plant.
Okay. So yeah, it gets confusing because in England they call cilantro coriander.
Okay.
The herb, the green leaves.
Okay.
But in the U.S. we call it cilantro, and then we call the seed coriander.
Oh, you can buy a little jar of coriander seed.
Yeah.
Okay.
And coriander seed is typically the dried seed, but the fresh green seed has a great flavor. The recipe is it's for a marinated chicken that uses the green coriander seed, and I always let my cilantro go to seed because it self-sows really nicely. The flowers attract lots of pollinators, and the green coriander seed's so good.
But I feel so you had the green coriander seed, and I feel like it was in a cocktail or something like that. Remind me what that was.
We were with someone, and they had put the green coriander seed into vodka and infused the flavor into the vodka, which made a great drink. But they were like, "Oh, I bet you can't guess what's in here," and I guessed.
It was David Perry, my collaborator on the 50 Mile Bouquet. Yeah, of course that he was trying to trick you.
Yeah, I was like, I got this.
But the flavor was so delicious, and I kind of came to that conversation as the outsider, thinking, "Oh, I hate cilantro. I would never grow it." But then you kind of opened my eyes, there's other stages of that plant that are valuable.
And taste totally different.
You're buying seeds from reputable seed suppliers. You list some of your favorite sources. Are you also harvesting your own seeds?
I do. I saved some of my flower seed last year. I saved some parsley seeds, some cilantro seed. I don't save a ton of seeds because I'm not isolated. I'll grow several varieties at the same time. So
you're not selecting for one cultivar or whatever.
If I ever have a bigger garden, I would like to do more seed saving myself. But I'm glad you brought that up because there's a lot of great people doing great work with seeds right now. Where they're developing new open pollinated varieties. So open pollinated means you can save the seed year to year, and if it hasn't, been pollinated out in the field, you'll get the same variety the next year.
Okay. Even in a backyard garden.
Even in a backyard garden. And And they're important because they can't be, open pollinated varieties can't be trademarked or the property of, there's,
They can't have a corporate patent on them or
yes,
something. Okay.
yes, and
Yeah.
so, and there's a lot of people in the Northwest especially who are growing or developing new open pollinated varieties that are regionally adapted, are more climate adjusted,
Yeah.
and I think buying seed as small gardeners, buying seed from people who are small, who are doing this work is so important to help preserve biodiversity.
Yeah.
And I think is a way that as a gardener with a small garden, you can actually have a pretty big impact, because you're spending your dollars with those seed companies is supporting them doing really important work.
And there are other efforts in other regions beside the Pacific Northwest that you probably are aware of.
Oh yes,
Okay.
all across. Yeah, there's in the South, all across the whole country. There's people who are doing the same work. I'm just most familiar with the companies in the Northwest, but yeah, it's so important because of course the climate pressures that we have here are different than the climate pressures that you might have in Missouri or something. Yeah.
But to bring it up, is encouraging listeners in other parts of the country or wherever they live, other countries even, to find local seed suppliers and learn more about those varieties.
Yeah.
I like what you said about adaptive. The plants become adaptive to the cultural conditions where you live. And I love it. Okay, so Willi, you invited me to be part of a seed event that's coming up. So tell me a little bit about that, and we'll make sure. I don't think anything's been posted about it yet.
We're in early March. We're posting,
Okay.
But so it's going to be a really fun event. The Filson is hosting us. It's a little bit of a launch for this book.
And Filson is the outerwear company, right? It's a Seattle-based company.
It's a really cool Seattle-based company. They have a whole women's line, and it's clothes for people who like to be outside. So I'm really excited that they're hosting us. And you're coming.
Yes.
Sarah Simon, who's the mint gardener, she's a watercolorist, and her husband is a big gardener. They have a beautiful garden. She'll be there. Ash Rodriguez, who has written many cookbooks and has a fungi foraging book that just came out.
Okay, great.
Laureen Edwards-Faulkner will be there, and Tilth Alliance.
Okay.
And so it's a seed swap, so you can bring seeds to swap. So it doesn't have to be seeds you've saved. It can be seeds you have left over from last year.
Okay.
So you can bring some seeds. We'll have a little station set up where you can put them into smaller little packets if you haven't already done it from home, and then there will be a table where they're laid out, and you can find some new to you varieties to grow of vegetables and flowers, and look at books from all sorts of local authors, and shop at Filson, see the clothes, and I just think it's going to be a pretty fun event.
I love it.
Saturday, March 22nd. Okay. From 1 to 4 at the Filson headquarters in kind of on the Seattle waterfront there.
I really appreciate you inviting me because you said specifically, let's get some flower seeds into this seed swap. And I have some. And what do you recommend if somebody has, say, last packets that are half full from last season?
Yeah.
Are they viable still?
They should be viable.
Okay.
Like most seeds are going to last 2 to 3 years. I mean, seeds are hardy, right? They find seeds that have been, in a jar for 1,000 years, and sometimes they sprout. So they are these like little. I always say that like planting seed is like my act of faith. I'm not a religious person, but it is. That's my
prayer.
Practice. Yeah,
I love
that. So most seeds, even if you did not store them optimally, will sprout. They might not have the greatest germination. They might only have 70% germination, but they're still going to do pretty well. So just bring your seeds. It's a fun event. They're free. If they don't sprout, it's not the end of the world.
It's a way to encourage people to meet each other and learn about maybe types of herbs and vegetables and flowers that they haven't grown before. But here's 50 seeds. Go try it and.
And meet some other people who like to grow stuff.
I love it.
Gardeners are always great, so I think it'll be fun, and I hope lots of people come.
You said you did one of the authors has done something like this with Filson before, and there was really good attendance, right?
Yeah, they had almost 300 people. Wow. Ash and Sarah did an event last year, so I think it's going to be pretty fun.
I think the time of year is perfect.
Yes.
everyone's thinking about starting seeds now, but March is even more ideal, because
Yes.
at least locally.
Yeah, March is a great time to start seeds. You inspired me. You have, of course, a beautiful greenhouse. I got like a little tiny
Pop-up
cold
greenhouse.
frame pop-up greenhouse, and that's where I started a lot of my flower seeds last year. And I was, I always find starting stuff under lights to be really fussy, and
I've never really done it successfully. Hanging the fluorescent bulb and that sort of thing. Yeah.
It's just the seedlings are never as robust as something you get from a nursery or that you start in a greenhouse, because
Okay.
I just think the amount of light, it can be hard to do inside.
It's hard to replicate.
It's
it
hard
makes
to
sense
replicate.
because with in a greenhouse, even in a little tiny, hobby greenhouse, you're getting light from all directions.
Yes, and
I love that you have that.
Yeah, it was so fun. I want like 5 of them. I actually want what you have, but I don't know where I would put it. That's been really fun. And so yes, March is a great time to start seeds, especially flower seeds. April is when you can kind of get them going. And
It's so funny you say that, because I just interviewed last week's podcast with Marin Mathis, who just wrote a book called The Sweet Pea School.
Oh,
and so she, her sweet peas are all sold out, but it inspired me to go buy sweet pea seeds. Way more than I need. And then we work lots with Johnny's Seeds.
I love Johnny's.
And Johnny's introduced four from their breeding program of 3 zinnias and 1 celosia mix, and they're exclusive to Johnny's. So I of course had to order those. So I've got lots of seeds, and now I have to find the time. So you're inspired. If you were going to tell me or suggest to me one edible seed to plant or get started, would you say radishes, or should I go the herb route?
Well, I would actually say for you and your audience that you might want to try sugar magnolia. It's a sugar snap pea.
Okay.
It has a purple pod that's edible with bright green seeds on the inside, and the flowers are 2-tone pink.
Wow.
Like a pinkish purple. So they almost look like a sweet pea flower, but they're edible. So you can eat the shoots, you can eat the flowers, you can eat the pods and the seeds. It's like a fully edible plant that's just gorgeous. Like, people will be like, if you bring to a party a salad that has those sugar snap peas in it, people will be like, oh my god, what are these? Like, they're so, and kids love them because they're purple, and they are great. I got seeds last year from Botanical Interests.
Okay. Well, where my mind went was, wouldn't a little vine with purple peas look great hanging out of a vase like this?
Yes, absolutely.
So maybe plant extras so you don't feel guilty putting them in an arrangement.
Yeah, and I'll share a photo with you so people can see, because it was by far my favorite thing that I grew last year.
I love that tip. That's great. Anything else you want to mention before we wrap up?
So the only thing I'll mention is I have a cookbook coming out in November.
I heard about this yesterday.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for you.
Yeah, it's called Veggies for Breakfast. So it's all just simple recipes designed to help people eat more veggies for breakfast. Because if you skip an entire meal, it can be hard to slot all those vegetables you're supposed to eat every day. Or if you have a lot of veggies in your garden in the summer, if you're not eating them at breakfast too, you can feel overwhelmed.
Really, I love this concept, and you're a mom, and I don't know if you have to trick your son into eating vegetables, but it seems like other parents would like this option too.
Yes, yeah, no, I've definitely, there's some smoothies and oatmeal and some stuff that has veggies that are snuck in there for, kids that are skeptical about the idea of eating vegetables, or husbands, I would say.
So Veggies for Breakfast coming out in November.
Yes.
I will tell you, when I learned how to make kale chips, my kids were in middle school and high school, and I came home from a event at a friend's house where they were served, and I made them, and I said to the boys, these kale chips are going to change your life. No way.
No.
They were not believers, but I still liked them.
Yeah.
So Veggies for Breakfast will probably save a lot of arguments over what people want, what kids and like you said, husbands won't want to eat.
Yeah.
And then you have a lot more talks going on around this, so people can follow you. How are they going to find you?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Willi Galloway on Instagram, and I'm starting a Substack. It's hopefully launching soon.
Will it be under your name?
It's I think you can find it. I'm still learning about Substack.
Yeah. I know
with
nothing.
me.
Yeah.
But it's called The Garden Dish, like by Willi Galloway. And I decided to. My friend Mari Malcolm thought of the name, and I like it because I love the idea that the dish is something that you serve up things to people, but I also like the idea that dishing is, like sharing little interesting tidbits of info with a friend.
I do.
So yes, it's going to be called The Garden Dish, and I worked at a magazine for a long time, so I want it to be profiles of beautiful gardens, interesting garden people, great varieties, recipes, all the good stuff that I loved writing when I worked at the magazine.
I love that. Well, I hope that launches soon and we can come find it, and we'll add the link to our show notes in the future whenever you let me know it's published.
Yes,
okay.
I'm hoping within the next week or so.
Great. Well, and you can see some inside photos of this beautiful book. I also have that radish guide that Willi's publisher shared, and links to all her social places. I like that we talked about edibles today.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it belongs in the conversation, and we have a lot of gardeners, a lot of food gardeners who follow what Slow Flowers is doing, because nothing, as you said, there's no monocultures here. We have to have an integrated garden and integrated farm. So
yeah,
thanks for the inspiration.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was fun.
Yeah, it really was.